Yes. So I actually wanted to check with everyone as to your sense of the nature of the day, because I'm detecting something in the air that's a bit unusual for me. And if I were to come from a cultural perspective in myself, or how I was trained and raised and whatnot, I would say it feels similar to a low, almost a depression. But it's not depression. It's not showing up as depression in me. What it's showing up as is kind of a very stillness, or a stillness about myself, and the atmosphere about myself. And I heard from someone else overseas in Istanbul that's also having a similar reaction. And so I just wanted to see if this is a global thing, or how you all register it in yourselves today.
I was like that yesterday. I'm completely the opposite today.
I see.
Very high energy.
Yeah, I'm very similar as well.
Okay.
Yesterday rather than today.
All right.
Well, here in London, there's a kind of a bit of a carnival feel around, because I think it's nice and bright and sunny. People are going out playing in the park, and there's a kind of holiday sense about things. So it's got quite a bright, light thing. And I myself am industrious and getting on with things and feeling bright and light in myself. But I feel a detachment from the carnival thing that's going on outside. And I'm aware of it. I'm aware of it, but in a sense, not participant in it.
Well, then maybe, if we're all coming from different ends of the bar, then we'll find somewhere in the middle to meet and see where things go. But just in case you're registering it, I have more of a softness about me today. Right, Sachin, even earlier, even the meeting just before this wasn't so hard hitting as sometimes it gets, is it? Was it?
No, I think that meeting for me, I see what you're saying. I did have a little bit of a lull towards we were at it for an hour. 40 minutes in, I felt a little bit of a low energy. I was like a little bit of a lull, but that just might have been me not being fully awake.
Well, in any event, for me, it's just kind of good to take registrations of these sorts of things and see what's in the air, see what the nature of the day is. Cassiopeia, did you say something? Yes.
Yes, in Holland it's very quiet. People are loud, going out, enjoying the good weather, but there is something in the atmosphere of the planets around it that's very silent, and it's almost like something is invading.
Do you have any?
Yes.
It's really a strange sense.
A strange sense. Okay.
Yes, because it is like something big is going to be unveiled.
Right.
And it's from another perspective, not one that normally people would expect. And it has to do with, I think it has to do with alien life. It has to do with unidentified flying objects, which are spaceships, which they are going to now agree that they exist. NASA's going to let something loose in the next future about it. So I think we are making made flown to another reality as we know till now on this planet, and the whole virus thing is included into it. It's really strange, but that's the silence that surrounds.
Yes.
It hangs around this planet.
The thing is, right, about that type of planetary behavior is that when it's storming in one place, right, if you've got vicious thunderstorms going on over here, then somewhere over here everything is still and quiet, because if you step away from the planetary thing for a minute, then everything is kind of in a state of balance. But it's only when you go local that something is, appears to be one extreme or another. And it kind of, for me, and the way that I'm feeling in all of this, it really, I feel the weight of something coming. And so I wrote something on the board today, which is something I wanted to work into a little bit. Now, I recognize or realize that, Orman, you've written, or I'm sorry, done a pod or a video on time, yeah, recently. I've not had a chance to look at it yet, but this is what's pressing me to get in for right now. And so I'm very pleased to have you here, because I think that'll kind of help to open some things up. But I would like to, with all of your permission, I would like to kind of unravel it from my perspective.
You'd be my guest.
Yeah. So
Well, once it's left here, I'm no longer in ownership. That's how I view about everything,
yeah.
including the air I breathe out. You can do what you like with it.
Right. Okay. Well,
Yes, I'm a bit quiet because I just having to get over a whole day of family,
that'll do you.
It's like Timmy pulled me through. I'm telling you, it's like shore leave. I need pulling through,
Right. Well, so when I
And
was
how are you intending to open it up?
just like this,
Just trying to remember it. Hang on a minute.
nah, I'm not trying to remember it.
No,
But there is definitely a certain depth to it from the standpoint of it's not like what we think, because there's an aspect of time that sits outside of our normal ability to perceive. And I say normal ability to perceive because I think that there does exist within us the ability to perceive it as it actually is.
Is there a date on this paper?
A date.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah, well, you said I did it a while ago.
I thought I
Was
had
it?
seen
Was it a
something.
blackboard? Was it?
I don't know.
Odd? What was it? What was it?
Zaire would be able to answer that, I think, probably best of anyone. Wasn't there something on time
I
recently?
know he's got the knowledge because I haven't got it. No, he takes that out as well.
Yeah, there could be. There's not blinking many of them. I'll have to go through them to see.
No, I'm sorry about that.
I think it is about the timelines that you recently put on the blackboard. The timelines.
Oh, I try and keep up. Go on then. That's all right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So
Where's Iona when you need her?
yeah, she'd know.
It coming on here. Look, that's funny. Yeah. Right.
Speak of speak of
We
the
were
devil,
just
right?
discussing you. We were having a very serious conversation about you. So, what date was that again? What was it called?
Yeah,
Container.
Iona.
The last thing to be said before you appeared was, "Where's Iona when you need her?"
Yes.
What are you asking me?
What I'm on about, Iona, is time, and I kind of led into it by saying, or things having to do with time, and I led into it by saying that I realize Orman has recently put out something to do with time, and I haven't had a chance to read it or listen to it or whatever it was yet. But
Are you talking about the elemental timeline?
I don't know. I
Yes.
didn't look at it yet.
Is that
That's
what
it.
you're talking at? What? Oh, I see.
Yes.
But you haven't had a look at it yet.
Not yet.
Oh, right. I'm sorry.
What?
Tens of thousands of
Just the
thousands of hours.
single blackboard with the
Oh.
picture on it. Yes.
Right.
Okay.
So here's
now-
where I want to start with it. Here's where I want to start with things that we live, as far as our frame of reference and our consciousness, we live in a three-dimensional
Mm.
place, right? Everything is three-dimensional for us, but I don't think it's always realized that for every level on the bar of creation, it's always three-dimensional for it itself. What I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. If we know these three dimensions, right? You're standing in a room like me, and I can walk forward, backward, right, left, and I can jump up and down. Okay, and so these are this kind of X, Y, and Z coordinates. I can go anywhere on this planet, right, that I am able to get to. And yet, if I look up at the sky, see, here's where it gets interesting. If I look up at the sky and I look at the moon, even though I know from a scientific standpoint that the moon is a sphere-like object or the sun is a sphere-like object, I don't perceive it that way because it is either higher in the case of the sun or lower in the case of the moon than where I'm at. And so what I perceive the sun and moon to be just with my eyes is something two-dimensional. It has height and width, but I can't sense its depth from this vantage point. And yet, if I were a solar being, I would be able to sense the spherical nature and the three-dimensional nature of being there. But then when I looked back at the Earth, because it's 2 steps removed, I would see it as a point and the entire solar system as a two-dimensional object, right? And when we look up at the stars, it's even further removed from us and we see that as a point. And so you have these 3 kind of symbols that show up that are really based upon perception rather than the reality of something. And you can say that a one-dimensional thing is a point, a two-dimensional thing would be like a cross, and a three-dimensional thing would be like a sphere. Now, our perception of time and where time fits into the universal perspective is we only see it with a limited view of it. I'm going to switch boards here. Explain what I mean. Imagine for a minute that you're a one-dimensional being. And it's actually quite impossible to draw a one-dimensional being. Can you all see this? Yeah. Because no matter how you try to draw it, it's going to have height and width. But I just want you to imagine that it's a point, okay? And it lives in a two-dimensional universe. And so it sits there. We can even do this. We can pretend that you're ants, okay? A bunch of ants walking along a string. And all you can see in front of you is the hind end of another ant. And you can't see what's behind you, and you can't look right, and you can't look left. And this is your perception. This is a very linear perception. And in some respects, that's how we treat and think of time, right? An ant would have no concept of something that exists up here if he's an ant on this string, right? And this is how we think of time. And we call this dot in our perception the present. And we call this the future and this the past. And yet we don't have much purview into this aspect of it. Put F for future here, and P for past here. But what, actually I'll put P down here because I need to draw something. But what we do have are memories of things. You can forecast something into the future, but I remember waking up this morning and the types of activities that I did. And so I'll kind of draw a line here and I can have that sort of recollection. And I remember 3 weeks ago doing something like this. And so I have that sort of recollection of things. And so part of the what's called the line of time, which isn't really a line, it's just our lack of perception, is to do with this aspect that we can see into the past of ourselves, but we can't really see into the future. And the present is sort of ever moving. But it gets more than this too. So this would be the past and the now. But there's also an aspect of concurrence because, for example, as I'm talking, I can also be walking over here. I can be holding this cup and I can be taking a sip, and all of these things are happening simultaneously, including the fact of your own existence right now. And so really what you can say is that our treatment of the past is not something that is linear. In other words, it's not like A happens, then B happens, then C happens, then D happens. But it has more of a nature of concurrency with it, because I can be drinking a coffee and doing this and talking to you, and at the same time you're doing all of this type of stuff. If it was a line of time, then I would have to wait until I'm done walking from here to there before I could speak to you, because that would have to be A before B. Yes. But it doesn't work that way. So I think in this, there's already this kind of hint that we're dealing with something that is more of an aspect of a perception problem with us than it is with the way or the nature that time actually is. And so this causes me to think about a very peculiar thing from the standpoint of when you look up at the stars at night. When I look up at the stars at night, I can be looking at an event that happened 100 million years ago, right? Because it might take 100 million years for the light of that star to reach me. And yet for me, it's the present. I look up at the stars as they appeared 100 million years ago or 50 million years ago or whatever the case might be. But for me, that's the present. Or that, wherever it came from, that is the extreme distant past, and it's already moved somewhere else by then. Another example is the idea that it takes about 8 minutes for the light of the sun to reach the planet. And so all gravity aspects aside, if the sun were to suddenly disappear, just suddenly go out, right, like that, we wouldn't know it for 8 minutes. We would still look up at the sky and see the sun for 8 whole minutes, even though it was no longer there. And so this is blurring the lines of past, present, and future. And I want to share a perception, because this perception takes me into a place that has to do with how this way ends up on the planet and how it arrives, right, in what we consider to be the future. But I want you to imagine, if you can, going back to the example of that sun just suddenly disappearing, maybe it goes supernova or whatever the case is. And I want you to imagine that you are traveling right next to one of the last photons, in other words, the last packet or bit of light that escapes that event. Now, the interesting thing about light is that it doesn't expend any energy as it moves. It's not like you fill it up with fuel and it can only go a certain distance and then it kind of peters out or runs out of fuel. Its very nature is movement itself. And so from a certain standpoint, since it's not expending any energy, then really it doesn't ever move. It doesn't ever really move through space because nothing is being spent, you see? If we want to move through space, we have to spend energy. A piece of light doesn't. But I want you to imagine for a minute that you are a traveling companion of that last packet of light that was emitted from the sun as it ceases to exist. And you're traveling side by side with it. What you would sense from its perspective is eternity, from the standpoint of past, present, and future all being intermingled. And I'll explain the present first, because if light is not aware of expending any sort of energy and is not aware of moving through space because that's its actual nature itself, then what it really is just a piece of information. It carries that information of that last event of that star that disappeared with it.
Can I make a point? Can I make
Yes.
a point?
Now?
Hello? Yeah, want to make a point.
Back to you.
In reference to something you said.
Yeah.
So if it gives no emission from itself, then unless you are standing in direct line with it, you wouldn't be able to see it, would you?
Correct. Yeah.
So you can't see anything that passes you by.
Yeah, right. And so I do
See what
realize
I-
that
are
there's
you,
a bit
are
of a
you getting at
stretch.
what do you see what I mean here?
Yes, and this analogy can only go so far, right? Because I'm just trying to share a perspective that if you could be its traveling companion for a minute.
Well, my point is about that very perception.
Yeah.
Therefore, your point of view is all you've got. And that depends upon whether or not you see it, or it's developed enough, or you are, for the perceptions to do anything with it.
Hmm.
So how do we, it means that you have a singular view and a countless unseen view.
Well, Orman, I think you're coming to the end, whereas I'm just getting there. I'm trying to come from this. I know, I think I know where you're going with it, but that's sort of the end of the journey.
I wasn't trying to take anyone. I was just
No, no,
curious
no.
about what you actually meant there.
Yeah. So kind of, I guess returning to that.
Carry on. Just carry on. I'll come back in.
Yeah,
I'm just curious about what you had to say about that. That's all.
Yeah, and I think it does come into play. Actually, I know it does come into play. But this is it's kind of a difficult, because we're not used to thinking like this, right? We're not used to perceiving things like this.
Right. About that, yeah.
Yeah. And so let me kind of put back. So you're this traveling companion of this photon, this piece of light on its journey. Well, it's not a journey, because as it passes through the various shells of the planet, or I'm sorry, of the planets surrounding the sun, travels by Mercury, it sees that as the present, but it also sees that final moment that it was, or that first moment that it was created, as the present, because again, it's not experiencing time. And it travels past the Earth, and it gets to the outer reaches of our solar system, our heliosphere, and it continues on its journey, never having a concept or perception of that was then, this is now, because nothing changes for it. This is the aspect of eternity that's so difficult to get. And the fact that it also sees the future all at the same time. And here's what I mean by that. Let's take the example of a star that we see 100 million years ago. Okay, now it's not traveling anywhere, it's not going anywhere, and it's not experiencing the passage of time. It just is an embodiment of information about its origin. And when it finally reaches us, from the point of where it came from, that would be 100 million years in the past. But because it's in this eternal presence, or state of being present, then when it passes by the Earth, it would actually see that as the future from relation to where it came. And so you get this kind of, now we're starting to talk about the three-dimensionality of space, where it's no more difficult for me to walk forward than it is to walk backwards, or right or left, or up and down. From that standpoint of a bit of light, its past, present, future are all kind of intermingled with one another. And what started me off on this is a phrase that I used recently, that I kind of need to rewrite in myself. And that phrase was, if you want to be a part of the future, then you have to be like the future. And I don't think that's true, actually. I think if you want to be a part of the future, and you want to anchor what is incoming, to the planet, in whatever form that might take, but you actually have to be like eternity. But you have to take into consideration all of these things and have that ability to kind of move through time. And I think that it is possible. I actually get the sense in myself, and it's very fleeting at moments, but I get the sense in myself that I can perceive things from this perspective. And it's a very non-human, non-cultural, I should say. Maybe it is a human, but it's a very non-cultural way to perceive something, because it's way, way, way outside of the bounds of anything that we have in our historical, education or even experience of things. But being a person that wants to see what's right and correct in the future, have anchorage and play with humanity now, then I feel like it's sort of my business to do this, right? To be able to kind of join this eternal aspect. And now, Orman, I think this now ties in, right, to what you were saying.
Oh, yeah. Can,
Hmm.
yeah. Yes, I agree with you. And it's not human either,
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
because it was there before human was. This is where you have pedigree of origin in something. Its origin is its status. So you've got three things at the initiation of what it is. And let's say that particular point of time, it will say, this is my point of time. So it is now.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So either it moves through space or space moves through it.
Or nothing can move through anything.
Or nothing can, exactly the point. Yes.
Yeah.
So if nothing can move at that time, then nothing is what it is.
Yes.
Because the next step for anything to happen is that a creational law of one form or another has to come into play with any kind of event that goes beyond that instance of the now.
Mhm.
And we know for a fact that you can't contain all of the light in the universe in a single spot at that one time. Last time they tried that, it blew up on them. All right. So what happens, therefore, is that there has to be some movement involved in it. So that particular moment, photon, last atom of light, which doesn't emit from itself, but nevertheless is there, goes somewhere. Because even if it doesn't go somewhere and creation does, then it's space and time moving through it, or it moving through space and time, whichever, or both are moving
Yeah.
together.
The
in
red
which we've
carpet of
got-
creation.
So what you have is a coalition of different speeds of time.
Yes.
What I'm saying about that is that that's a singular event. And so for that movement to take place, that light must be seen.
Mhm.
If it's to be realized, perceived, or known, and it has to be known, perceived, or realized by something other than itself. Do you understand? So
Yes.
you have a dynamicism of the event, and the first dynamicism of any event is its mechanism. And what provides the structure of that mechanism is the formation of criteria or law that determines its possibility or the event that it's involved in. So in a simple term, what in the woman, the mother, decides the gender? Because there you've got that single moment there is an example of what I'm talking about, because whatever it is that decides that gender in the mother or by the mother, through the mother, that's creation moving through her, or she is moving through creation, in which case it's her decision as to whether it's male or female. Something has to decide it. And science can't put its finger on that. So it says it's chemical, or it finds some other kind of mechanical reason that science can't determine, because it's too multiple for science to lay down in a simple form. So it gets off the question, and the question is, what decides whether it's male or female? So there's an example of it at what you might say ordinary level. So whether it's, as you would put it, philosophically poignant, depends upon the perception or the intuition or the process involved in that which stands in that moment's future. It cannot stand in the same now as the event, because the event is not to do with it. So something else has to have an event to receive it. And therefore you've got the beginning of natural law, whether they know each other or not, because that means you have a whole series of last atoms flying off in any direction to collect a future, or to be part of a time sequence, or in fact, to allow creation to pass through it. And in the passing through it, creation brings along its opposite, which sees it.
Yes.
Transmission, reception. So the laws sit in the middle. So you've actually got a pedigree. The pedigree, I think, can be symbolized by three things: light, and the only thing that something else can see isn't the light of it itself, but its knowledge. So if it does transmit anything at all, it transmits the knowledge of itself rather than the light of itself, if you see what I'm trying to say.
Yes, yes, 100%.
So the second part receives the knowledge. So there's your bar on one side. On the other side, what does it come to? Because whatever that other one is, it's got to be dualistic, because it's now got light and knowledge aiming at it. And it comes to a triangle where this one has two views. See, so
Yeah,
it can't do anything. If it steps out of its now, it must take on lesser form than itself. And the first division of itself is the knowledge, separation of that light from the knowledge. Now, you stand here now and you look at a screen. That's pouring light at you. You can cope with billions of these rays of light. And as a whole thing, you can discern difference, color, shape, form. As a singular event, it only has the one issue of itself. You know?
and yet it's nothing until
yet-
it has anchorage in me, right?
That's exactly right.
If-
Yes.
If I
that's
step
right.
out of the way of it, then
Yes.
it just, I mean, it'll find anchorage here in the blackboard in the form of heat, but it won't. See, this is the thing, I think, where, like you said, if you wouldn't be able to see the bit of light that you're traveling next to as your traveling companion unless it actually smacked into you, right?
That's correct.
And
yeah.
you provided it with some sort of anchorage of expression, and it impacts you and alters your course.
But
See,
you
this is why it's
can,
relevant.
if you can take on knowledge of it.
Mhm. But
That
in
gives
so
us-
doing, it
well,
dies.
don't you see, that gives us a primary behavior.
Yeah.
Because if you take on the knowledge of something else, you are in response to it or reaction to it, but not it itself.
Right.
Do you
Yes,
understand what I'm saying?
absolutely. I do.
Which
Yeah.
means one or the other has to be the positive or the negative. One or the other has to be the dominant or not. One and the other has to be the perception or the intuition, as to whichever one is actually in management or control or custodianship of that knowledge. Because you can run with things and have a knowledge of it via the instinct. You can have knowledge of it in an empathic way. You can have many forms of that knowledge which give rise to human behavior or us as a behavioral machine. You know, so where then, you said, does the way come into this? Because that's got to be the first issue, hasn't it? That difference between what it is that you perceive or you are intuitive about, as an example, and you in it. So that's that one part of the trilogy where the two come to, isn't it? Into you. So you've got the light, the knowledge, and you.
So before we move off of this, though, I think what this causes in me is the idea that a way isn't a way unless it finds residence in someone and can interact with
There
someone.
you go. The man,
Otherwise-
exactly. Couldn't agree with you more.
Right. Otherwise, it's just information, right? Like
Yes.
my example. If I stand
And that's
out
what
of-
everybody else has got, isn't it? A head full of all this crap, as we call it. I mean, they got a belly full of it.
Yeah.
You get a little piece of paper with it, yes? But there's no actual connection to the thing itself, is there?
Right. And so the big question then, the $64,000 question, I think that's the second time this has come up, is as a way man, how do I put myself in a position to be responsive to it, to be in response, not responsive, to be in response to it and not let it just go to waste.
Right. Exactly.
And that to me, I think requires a certain type of engineering and a certain type of
Oh, no,
position
there's more to it.
in
Piers.
oneself.
Sorry to say this, but you're right, absolutely right. But there's more to it. There's some important features that are overlooked in that particular position, stance,
Mm.
moment, time, whatever you want to call it. All right, because it's connected to a multiple possibilities. Whichever way you go, you see yourself within it. So the event is a singular event, but it's surrounded by a multitude of possibility.
Brings to mind
So-
the idea of the prism. That
Exactly. There you go. It's exactly right. Except that it depends upon the origin of what it is that's looking at it. It depends upon the origin of what it is another example that is looking from someone at it. How do people see the way? You've got exactly the same process, but at human level. So when you get people come to these meetings, right, you standing there doing what you're doing are that single atom.
Yeah.
And you ain't going nowhere, are you?
not unless I collide with one of you.
Well,
Yeah.
that
In-
depends to
Yeah.
whom you engage,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But that means that your particular atom of light has a degree of intelligence, has a degree of self-knowing, has a degree of origin, or has an origin that has a greater pedigree about it, in the form of it's not unconscious, it's semi-conscious, or as again, it's not semi-conscious, it's fully conscious. Because who's to say what the quality of that one atom of light is? Because if it can part company with something of itself, which then travels in other form, that being of knowledge, because it can't give its own light, you understand? Then it can transfer itself from the form of fully conscious, semi-conscious, unconscious, or just in the form of an intuitive signal. If you see what I'm trying to say. So when they come to the work, when they come to listen, or you start talking or something like that, you are actually enacting and living that actual event. You are actually doing what you're talking about on the blackboard.
Yeah.
Because if you try to see the foundation and the foundation of the future of it, that foundation has got to be based against something greater than the moment that you are at now. Otherwise,
So
it
something
dies.
staggering comes into me now about this in this from the standpoint of this, this what has condensed here was once upon a time, billions of years ago, nothing but light. And it condensed into this light, or into this life that stands here before you now. But what it's in process of is what's being newly transmitted from the future, right? Because there's no use putting I am the antiquities that can offer anchorage to the future from that standpoint.
Well, you could put it that way, yeah. You get away with that. You'd also get away with the fact that you could say that your structure now isn't necessarily a guideline to the form of your future or to your future form, which emerges out of the structure of yourself at this time.
Yes.
Because in the future, you would have to live with lesser structure and greater originality of form. That would be primal. As it was in the beginning, so shall it be in the end. You understand what I'm saying here? Because as you go further up the bar, less natural law, less terms and conditions of life, less physicality, therefore greater freedom of life form itself.
See, yes. And the idea that everything returns to the source of its arising.
It's arising, exactly.
When this is, but see, it's not that simple, is it? Because when this is done, when I return to the source of my arising, I also bring me along with it, which is something additional to what I came from. This is the idea, right? Of
you might say the new you, the one that in the future, that you're manifesting.
Yeah.
Because that new person is there, but not now.
And this is the genius of creation.
That's right.
It's literally a perpetual motion machine from that standpoint.
Yes, but the point is, how do we include that in our actuality of life?
Well,
or should I say better, in the actuality of our living in life?
Yes. I don't see one as having an opportunity to do that if one dwells in the past.
Right. So I'm sorry, just one thing, and then I'll shut up and let you carry on, because you drew me in there. I got drawn into it. I can't help it. Sorry, I'm like this when I get drawn in. Just leave me outside with the water bowl. I'll be all right. You can laugh. Yeah, right. So, what I was. I forgot what I was going to say now. I got sod it. Oh dear.
Well, it probably had to do with my last comment that it's of no use to live in the past if one wants to make that kind of return to creation.
It's a big problem, because if everything was as it should be, because it is the way it is, we wouldn't even know this. There would be no way in which we could know what we have just spoken or come to terms with it, because there would be no means by which we could structure that new person of ourselves to cope with it or to deal with it. And we say to people when they first come to the word, look, you are the person you are now, remember them. Because if you ever get lost, you know where to go back to. Because the new person will be what it is that you bring about in yourself by your own work. What you do, what you make changes in, what you adjust to pursue that dream, that learning, that placing things that you yourself are inquiring about, right? I mean, you can't, as an example, if it's just the occult, you can't turn around and say, I am occult, because you can say the word. Right? You can't climb a mountain because you read a book on it. If you follow me, you'll die halfway up the mountain if you get that far. And it's the same thing. So we also have to embody in what it is that occurs within us That's consequential to what it comes and what we do with it. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And we live in that event all the time. So that is the new now. We're taking that new now into this, but there's a feature in that new now that gives it a continuum of going on. And that is the fuel that it requires to do it. Nothing works without a fuel. You can't go without fuel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You have to sit down and eat dinner at some point, even if you manage to go a week. You know, eventually you're too weak to lift a knife and fork. So everything
This is the
requires-
study of the Great Resistance, then, right? Is this the study of the Great Resistance?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the thing is, what do you resist? Because you know, you call it resistance, but is it resistance, or is it just that, you know, some things require a pressure to take on the right kind of shape,
Right. Yeah.
in you?
Yeah.
Because not everything is square, not everything is triangular, not everything is circular. But they're all three-dimensional.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, it's simple because the philosopher says, oh, wait a minute, if we take those 3 dimensions and we throw them in a certain direction, that is indicative or descriptive of the 4th direction, the 4th way, the fourth dimension, etc. But that's a 3-dimensional explanation of it, isn't it?
Mhm.
And it can't in any way whatsoever have any kind of cognizance even of what that 4th condition or state actually is, because it's only 3-dimensional itself.
Well,
And
certainly
it's
not from
exactly
one
what you
foot.
said. If you want to be 4th dimensional, you've got to have some 4th dimension, because
And you
that's the
certainly
only
can't
thing.
be it with 1 foot in this, right? I mean, you have to
Well-
sidestep into it at some point in time and be it. Otherwise, you can't play this game of keeping 1 foot there.
Well, actually, what Jerdef said the same thing, didn't he? I mean, he gave the description, right? Because this was a challenge, believe it or not, between Ouspensky and Jerdef in the middle of one of his works, right? Where Ouspensky challenged him about this particular concept. And he said, well, you see, the difficulty is that who's perceiving? So he gave the example of the surface of a lake. Underneath there is a fish, and the fish is looking out, all right? Or is facing the surface. And someone comes along and they put both their hands into the water and both their feet into the water, and that's all. But the fish only sees 4 things. It doesn't see a whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It only sees what's got the 4th bit in it, if you kind of get my picture. And in the same way, what we see coming through the veils, and here's another good example between the difference between the astral domain and the ethereal domain is exactly that description, because you don't see what's coming through.
Yeah.
Because it's got to come from one octave of something into another, and the rules, process, shape, form, dynamics of each domain don't always work hand in hand. You know, so why is it then, therefore, if it's in the astral domain, that it sees entirely the ethereal domain, which is a lie, because it can't do that.
Yeah.
It will only see the bit that's got the astral in it.
And it's the same. So it loses a dimension, right? One above, one below. It always loses a dimension.
Exactly the point. But this is where people also go wrong with way work, because they make it the same. They don't keep it way work. And I often use that expression. Listen, the reason you're having trouble trying to do this work is because you're trying to do it.
Mm.
When you learn to do it the ways way, it works. When you try to do it your way, it doesn't.
Yeah.
But it's very hard for people to see what's actually meant by that, because they've built a certain ideology, a certain pride, a certain
Well,
ego of self in
it's
their
like-
self view of it, right?
It's like trying to eat yesterday's food all over again. It doesn't work.
You know, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I agree with you.
Gotta win your food each and every day. I
Right.
think that's actually in the Lord's Prayer, isn't it?
So what? So give us this day our daily bread. You mean?
Yeah.
No, I say that to my bank manager. but I
Should be
never get-
win us, win, win, may we win for ourselves our daily bread. Instead of
I
give
used to,
us.
I used to have another rhyme like that. You know, it was in the 1960s. Yeah. Hello, our Father who art in Downing Street, Harold be thy name. Right.
Harold
This is
be
about. And I used to go all the way through, like it was just a political satire on it. Yeah. But yes. But in the importance, just one point. In the importance of that, which is supposed to be Sumerian now, it was once Babylon, but they keep finding another culture from where it came, you know. So its origin's about 5,000 years old. What would be the purpose of structuring such phraseology? Because, you know, we could really say, couldn't we, you know, our Father who art in Downing Street, Harold be, oh, now Boris be thy name, you know. I mean, we could say that, couldn't we? I mean, would that be allowable or what? I mean, what would it actually do? Because in the Sumerian times, they didn't really make up, you know, they didn't have names like Boris. A lot of names they had were ones that nature or they had come to in themselves.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about Biggest Dickus. You don't naturally come to that, right? That's a Roman name. Sorry, Pierce. You might not be familiar with, you know, Monty Python, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's incontinentia.
Oh, we'll say it again. What?
Incontinentia buttocks. That's his wife.
Yeah.
Incontinentia, his wife. Yeah. Yes, I suppose flatter buttocks would be the two children, wouldn't it? Yeah, yeah. I mean, but the point is, right, what then? Why aren't we witnessed in this conversation?
Why aren't we?
Yes, why aren't we witnessed in this conversation? Because this conversation really is like the food of the gods compared to the ordinary law of two, isn't it? You know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Because we're talking about the structures and dynamicisms and forms and shapes of the way itself. You know, it's something that all of us here, I'll throw Sachin in for good luck, you know, are familiar with, right? But yet we still also at the same time have our struggles too.
Yeah, it kind of brings up in me this idea that maybe the word work isn't even correct, because when you're actually doing it and in it, there's nothing, it's not hard work. It's different than that. It actually has a certain vibrancy about it that is like the feeling of being right in oneself, not right intellectually, but right, doing the right thing and being the right thing. And there's no work about it. It's just simply a being, a state of being when you're in the way. It's a funny expression too, in the way. You have to get out of the way to be in the way. I think so.
Yeah, I keep saying that to people, you know, the only reason you're not yourself is because you've got yourself in the way.
Yeah.
Which is totally contradictory to what it actually means, isn't it?
No, but
You're
it's
not
actually so
yourself
true.
because you got yourself in the way. I mean, you know, it is, isn't it? It's
When I stand out here and
contradiction
try
of
to do
terms,
it,
right? Yeah.
No, it's absolutely true, Orman. When I stand out here and try to do it, it's a flop. It's a mess. But
I don't know
when-
about that so much, but
Well-
a mess according to you, but you're the one who knows.
yeah,
They don't know. They think it's amazing. You'll
Well, I
be
do
surprised.
see-
I've done the worst nights of my life, and I've got boxes of chocolates, bunches of flowers, applause, and they said it was fantastic. I thought,
Yeah.
very confusing.
Right. Now I do set a certain bar, but the bar isn't based on the personality of it. The bar is based on what attends actually.
That's
I
right.
can tell when a night is off if it's just, you know, me at the end of it standing here in an empty room.
You mean that atom that never went anywhere and nobody
The atom
saw
that
it?
never went anywhere. Yeah.
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 Hmm.
But
God on
it is
your
a very
own,
dualistic thing because, you know, we do have this opportunity to give anchorage to that. See, here's what keeps me up at night is that I want to be that person at the very edge of whatever's coming in at this point in time that can be useful. And it's so easy to be back
Useful
there.
in what way? What do you mean?
Useful to the, well, it's useful to creation first and foremost by
I think
way
useful
of
to your
humanity.
purpose for being there, don't you think?
Yeah, well, both. It's kind of two ends of the spectrum, isn't it?
Well, not unless your purpose is creational.
Yeah, I would say it is.
Yeah. Then you've got a pedigree and a divinity
Hmm.
in the same space, haven't you?
Hmm.
One has to be a pedigree and the other has to be a divinity. The divinity being what attends it. And I've been saying lately to people that the way in which to see a divinity of self is according to what attends you.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean a God, because the term divinity means religion, means God, means this. It's not. It's a fuel. And the fuel has a source, and that source is something divine, but not God.
Mhm.
Because you can be divine at creational level. It's not so easy to be divine down here. Or should we say in a lower form of self, right? Because somewhere down the bar of yourself, you're going to leave behind that divinatory that belongs to you.
Mhm.
The divinity, sorry, that belongs to you.
Mhm. Right.
Even your divine will stay there because you can't put yourself out in contradiction to creational law. Because when you come back into a solar and within domain, you cannot take your identity with you. It stays on the outside. It stays at that level because it just won't be allowed. You won't be allowed to do that because it will kill that particular core or domain.
Well,
That's
so
why we don't have a God here.
yeah, and actually what comes up for me now is that this is really the only condition in which it's possible to do such a thing.
That's right. Yes.
You know, you can't crash one piece of light into another piece of light and expect an explosion. They just won't see each other at that level. Then there can be no marriage of higher and lower if everything is high or everything is low. It has to be that condition of, you know, we're here on this planet for 70, 80, 90, whatever years. And
Well, in
that's
our
the time
case,
we have to do it.
yes, but well, there you go. You see, now you're talking real basics here, right? Because isn't that the relationship between the planet and the sun? We're both marrying organic life. That's why its color's green. You've got a blue planet and a yellow sun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it has to have a medium in which it marries.
Yes.
So it is possible to do that. But what's the medium? So what's the medium between yourself and your higher self? There's got to be something similar.
Well, it's this little blip of time.
I think it's very often called the entity of self, because that's the thing that's moving. The rest is standing still. Do you see what I mean? You said that yourself earlier on, didn't you?
That's right. Yes. Yeah. I don't know if I did, but you're right. It is.
Well, you did. You said because it's standing there, it's not doing anything.
Right.
It doesn't give off any kind of light.
Right. Right.
And the assumption was that light moves. Well, we only recognize it because we're head on. That's like I
And because
said.
we don't.
But if you stood next to it, you wouldn't see it pass you by, would you? If it doesn't give out any radiation of itself, but you could perceive something passing you by. You can come with knowledge to that.
But
Because
only
if it
if
was to give
you
anything less
interact.
than itself, it would be its knowledge, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And the
Well,
knowledge
so-
can be graded.
Yeah, but knowledge only appears if it doesn't interact with something. Knowledge is just information about
that's right.
about its origin.
Agree.
That's it. Right. It's only when
Yes.
it has this interaction with this what we are, this entity of self, that it can become knowledge or possibly even wisdom or understanding.
Well, what about experience?
Well, experience would be the medium then, wouldn't it?
Well, it would be the, you can't say it would be the past because
No,
it's
it would be
made,
the medium by which-
it's made at the time. So
It is.
what's it made from? It's made from the other two ends
Mhm.
together, right?
Yeah. This
There's
goes back to
another
what I was
example.
saying.
What-
It's a
Exactly. Yes.
yeah, it's not something you do. You don't do work. You don't do the way. You either are it or you're not it at the moment, at the point.
Yes.
There's no doing anything. It's just being it.
Yeah.
In my
Do you think that people lie about that?
huh?
Do you think that people, that has to be one of the greatest lies, doesn't it? Because they spend their entire life lying about that very one point.
Yeah. Well.
And when you try to tell them that they're lying about themselves, they become very offended
Mhm.
and awkward. In fact, almost difficult, really. Because well, there's a role of, there's a role of suspension, isn't there? They've been put into this state or condition because they can't take another step with what they are.
Yeah.
So there has to be a demand made for something. What am I then? Or they think they know, so they'll substitute the think they know stuff. So and it all goes wrong. But they're well trained for this. They're well trained to lie.
Sure.
It's very hard to get people to see that. But we could change the terms and say it's not lying, it's unfortunateness. But it don't really work, does it? It doesn't do much.
No, I'd
It's
much prefer to call it what it is.
Yeah. But unfortunately, sometimes it is unfortunate, and that's because you can't tell them that. So how the hell do you get around this problem? You're bunching on something there that actually is a problem at most levels in the creational way. Because everything has to struggle to originate itself. Origination is something caused by oneself. Creation can't give you origination. You can draw something that's original from creation, but it isn't you, is it? You are in ownership of it. You are in custodianship of it. You are in possession of it. You are in anything else of it. Huh? What in it is you? You know what I'm saying? Because you've got to treat it, no matter how finely it's balanced or its source, as separate to self. Because you were born with an identity and an individuality, all right, and a content.
But doesn't it have to be the result of you and it? Because if it's
Well, that's,
just
yeah,
you,
that's what I'm saying. Yes, I agree. With
Okay.
you. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
because if it's just you or just it, then it's either delusion and fantasy or non-interaction.
Yes.
Yeah, avoidance maybe even.
Or lies.
Yeah.
Because that could be resistance, couldn't it?
Yeah.
But who makes the choice? That's what I'm saying about the mother. What in the mother, rather than who in the mother, makes the decision as to masculine or feminine?
Yeah.
And it's exactly the same thing from another point of view, what you're saying now. Exactly.
suppose
Which is it?
Schrodinger's
Is it
cat
it? Is
makes
it
that
is it
choice.
you? Is it it? Or is it what? What makes the choice?
See, and
Because
the
something
answer
has
would
to
be yes.
stand there. And that is no, you're right. You're absolutely, listen, you're right. But there's something that very often missed, in my opinion, in this, and that is what attends you at the moment.
Mhm.
It's neither you're not it, it's not you, but there's something in attendance.
Yes.
And it's that attendance that gives you the divinity of it. So
And it
divinity-
leaves a little piece behind when it moves on. It
Well,
leaves a little
yeah,
piece.
there you man, carry on, do it, boy. I'm listening.
No, it's right.
Go,
You know,
fire, run up that road quickly. You got it right.
Sure,
Just keep
sure.
going.
Sure. So the whole point behind this is that it's not about you, it's not about it. Like Orman said, it's about what attends. But when something attends and then departs or moves on, I should say, it leaves a bit of itself with you, and it takes a bit of you with it.
I mean,
This is where this kind of, it becomes more than the sum of its parts in that regard.
yes, I did hear you. Okay.
Yeah. That's the
Point,
point. Really.
there's also the issue, isn't there? If that is a divinity, then it has to be what's in the middle, which means that it itself doesn't become involved, but something, because of what it is, enables an involvement.
So it's a catalyst.
There you go, man. Absolutely right. So this is the standard of what we're dealing with here, right? Catalytic.
Yes.
Well, a catalytic way is rarer than the rarest form of way there is, because that's the way it's made. That's the way it's brought together. That's what makes it. But then there's one more part, and that's what brings it alive, right?
Mm.
So you have the living event. Now, we're organic life, right? So we have to live. We're not creation.
Mhm.
We come after the event of creation. We are life that lives in creation, and life was made, in my estimation anyway, to maintain creation
I agree with that.
at
100%.
all levels, like an anthill. There's an ant for every job.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But we, very often, most of the time, in fact, have not been very good people. We've not been good little boys and girls. Because everything else in creation does its job, the big collective, they live according to, they do their thing as it is. They don't go off and become something else.
Yeah.
You come here,
Abdicated.
and everybody is someone else, aren't they? They're lying, or they're this or that, or something else. So you're not likely to get much of a result from the human race, I'm afraid.
So
What you
unfortunately,
will get, of course, is a bucket of ego
yeah,
or something like it.
yeah, yeah. Or it turns into a culturalization of a lesser form of what it was or what it should have been.
Exactly right.
Becomes culturalized.
Which is where the culture makes itself from, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because it can't make itself out of nothing. So it has to take something else and turn it into what it fuels, what fuels it.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And that's where it comes from. That's where the culture comes from. It can't become anything else. What's it going to do? It can't go any further down creation. We're at the end of it here, aren't we?
In the natural order of things, the culture is a perverse form of something much higher, known as form and structure.
Yeah, right.
Isn't it? Right? Because form and structure are what is natural to creation. Everything comes here with form,
I
structure.
love it when you say things like that. Orman structure is natural to creation.
Yeah.
Or did you say forward structure?
Form and structure. Right.
It sounded good to me anyway, yes.
You can keep it then. It's good.
Oh, no, that's very kind. Thank you. It's
No,
very
but
kind.
form and structure are what's natural to creation. What's unnatural is the way that wrong manufacture in humans has created a culture out of it. In other words, it's something that binds and congeals instead of something that actually offers opportunity for the future.
Well, what's the planet going to do with it when it doesn't need it anymore?
Like it likes to.
It's open to question, isn't it? Because it does have something else to feed, doesn't it?
Mhm.
With itself. Do you know
Well,
what?
even the planet's doing its job. Even the planet's doing its job in all of creation. We're the only ones that really don't seem to be.
When we should be serving a planetary purpose. So we're right at the very basics of what it actually means to be a way person. When you say a way person, then that doesn't mean to say that you actually are. It means you're on the way rather than in the way.
And only when you're
In the
actually
way,
on
it's a
it.
working thing, it's a working part, right?
Yeah.
If you're on the way, well, then it's a jolly good lesson at school or something. Or it's a dance class on a Saturday afternoon or something, or Sunday. That's I'm joking. Right. How did you go? Did you? I mean, your electrobots. Your
Yeah, good.
really?
Right, Sachin, has it been useful? We've been doing.
I sort of had this picture of about 2 dozen American women or something, you know, with short socks on and that sort of thing.
No, not so much yet.
Oh,
No, it's been good. That's a shitty way to say that. It's been useful. Good is low. Well, where do we take it from here then?
well, I think apology to Sachin, really. Of course, the poor man's head must be falling off at this moment. I mean, you know,
I was helping
yeah.
him.
I wouldn't say anything. Don't tell your friends about this because they never believe you. Really.
I've got, so Kim was listening to the whole thing. We were making cake. That's why I was off camera. But we might have a new member. Kim's my
Right.
girlfriend.
Welcome, man. Good.
So she's
all
been
right.
she's been saying, "Oh, Sachin, I'm getting a lot of value. I'm not fully connected. Maybe I should become a member." I'm like, "Well, that's your choice. If you want to become a member, I'm not gonna try to."
We have a great time at Christmas. I don't know if that runs against you. Does it? Is that right? Tim sings his songs and all sorts of things. Yeah.
Well, Sachin, if that's the case, then thank you because you've just doubled our membership. It's a joke. There was
Actually, that was a question I was going to ask you. What happened? Didn't the invitation go out or something?
It did. I don't know. You know, I think it's something to do with the nature of the day. I've had a lot of people saying, "I'm sorry, I can't make it." You know, this sort of thing. But the sense that goes with it is that it's not like something's wrong. It's just wasn't on for everyone.
Yeah. Well, do you think they've had too much during the week or something?
Probably
Yeah.
not, because
I mean, because you're at it almost every day, aren't you?
not really. Actually, I just stack it all up on the weekends, and yeah, for right now anyway.
Mm.
Our American members were definitely sent the link again in case they'd lost it.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's happened to them.
Our American.
Well,
members?
the ex-Vercel Americans were all, you know, Joe, as
You mean those we swapped with Pierce?
excuse me.
He did
Yes,
a trade deal, Sachin.
Yeah.
He did a
Yes.
trade deal. Yes.
yeah, those ones were all sent the link. Oh, excuse me.
He did that ages ago. What he's doing? Yeah.
Well, in any event, it goes on because of the love of it, right? Not because of any other reason than that, I think.
So there you go. Now it's your show, my friend. Come on.
I'm just trying to take a pulse for a minute on where it should go. I'm feeling.
I'm always interested in the same problems. You know, I never get new problems. There's always the same problems. I find that quite interesting. What do you have to say about that? Because you must be finding, in fact, Michael O'Doherty tonight is an Irish guy here tonight. I mean, you know, maybe you could be getting the same thing as well. You know, because I mean, you're facing up front now, aren't you? You're watching it coming towards you, aren't you? The same problems, because they're still giving the same problems that they gave in 1970, 51 years ago. I don't get any pleasure out of telling you my age. I was even 23 then. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? Because we are supposed to be the you know, the personified of it, aren't we, or something? You know, how on earth can they actually really see you? Because the truth of it is they can't. I believe they can't see you. This is where we get. This is a problem that causes the problems. They can't see you. They don't know what you're capable of. They have got no idea of the learning and the years that you've put into all of this, where you've shaped and molded and manufactured and manifest yourself in those particular covens of things and domains of things and states and conditions of things, all of you here, right? And I'm not just talking about a few years, I'm talking like over the many decades of things. Oh, God, don't say that to a 10-year-old. You think you've gone out, you know. You know.
So I had an interesting. This ties in, Orman. I had an interesting email from a fella that has kind of come here and there, and really, you know, he has his own agenda, I think, but it's okay. But he started his own group, and he wanted to know how my thing is going. And he says, you know, all he gets is old people with his group, and that young people don't seem to want to actually work or do anything anymore.
Excuse me, Pitt. Sorry, but what? He started his own group of what? Gurdjieff
stuff.
Oh, he's a Gurdjieff group.
Yeah. You know the fellow. You've met him.
Why?
Yeah, but
who's that?
But
names.
Yeah, I'm not going to put it on names.
Names, dates, time.
Yeah, right.
Address.
No, but my response to him was that, you know, really, if that's the case, then, like, when I look at myself in this standpoint and the way that I'm approaching things, I'm just as guilty of doing things just the way I've always tried to do them, instead of being something new. And we're not going to attract a younger generation if we keep doing things as old folks do, right? We have to. You can't expect someone to come to you. Sometimes you have to go meet them where they are, grab them by the arm and drag them up to where you are, or to where you're at. Yeah. So this is my new approach. I'm rethinking things. I'm rethinking how I go into things and what I bring, because I'm a very versatile man. I can do a younger frequency as long as I'm aware of it. As long as I'm aware that that's what's required.
I honestly, actually, genuinely understand what you're saying. What about you, Enigma? I'm ringmaster at the moment. I'm stirring up the next bit. I mean, what about Enigma? I mean, can I call you Enigma if you're called Michael?
You can call me Enigma. It's just
Can I call you another name as well? Can I invent one for you?
You can invent one for me if you fancy it. As long as it's a nice one.
I was thinking of calling you Oi, because everybody else.
Oi, mate.
Oi, you.
Can you hear me all
a
right?
back name to go with it. Oi, you. How about that? Yeah.
Can you hear me all right though?
Imagine that you develop enough and then nature turns up in a dream one night and says, I've got a name for you. You say, what is this? Oh, you. Right.
Okay. That might mean something in Kazakhstani or something like that. You never know.
Kazakhstani. Okay. Bounty, aren't we? So what about you?
I think you know. Look, let's look at it fundamentally. What we're dealing in has got to have a fundamental appeal for everybody. So it's not about the contents of what we deal in. It's the way you package it and the way you talk to people about it and how you put it across. Because you know, young people have needs, desires, and wishes and dreams in life. So how do you reach them? How do you reach them? That's the question, isn't it? It's always been the big question over the years. Yeah, I mean, you know, one of the things you find is that people who are very settled in their life don't seem to have an interest in this kind of thing. It's like a lot of the people who've come along have been people who've been a bit on the edge of society, a bit kind of wrecked in one way or another. Kind of.
You mean the people they call themselves esoteric?
Yeah, exactly. They're kind of oddballs and weirdos tend to be a lot in the population of these things. You know, you don't get many bank managers who are functional bank managers in this theatre, do you? So there's something to be said about.
What about the aspect then that it is only really for the few?
Well, that's a big consideration. Absolutely. I mean, I've thought of that many times.
Consideration. It is true.
Because
but on a planet of 9 billion, how much is few?
Well, that's arguable, isn't it? That's the point. Yes, exactly. Yes, go on.
You could say 100 million people is few.
I mean, if it's for a large quantity of people, my experience, you probably have a different perspective to me because you were in a different position in that. But back in Putney, there were hundreds and hundreds of people all sitting in a hall, and because of the circumstance, I think a lot of them, you know, just kind of did their own thing. It wasn't really getting to them, and they were, you know, more interested in the birds or you know, the interest of it, etc., etc., etc. But a serious way.
Well, hang on a minute. Hang on.
That's my experience.
Well, that wasn't what I was doing. I mean, I've said it. That was clever. I've said it 1,000 times, right? The whole point that it all began in the first place,
yeah,
was because people used to knock on our doors,
yep,
and say, "What about this? And what about that? And can you come and look at my bedroom because I get things going bump in the night and all this sort of gear," right?
That's right.
And that was the only reason we did it, to show them how to do it. But the problem that we faced, which is still the same today, is that the people that can do it aren't the same as the people who require it to be done. In other words, they're not the right kind of people to be able to do it. So showing them how to do it meant, most of the time, introducing them to a different side of themselves,
yeah,
so that they could do it. Hence those things like meter stride, you know, alter your stride, meter strain, all of the things that were said and done were really manufactured and written and whatever else, so that they had a winning chance with themselves in that direction, because that would have led them in the right direction. Because it would have, how would you say, you know, give them something to cogitate on that would go somewhere towards that point of view or that end result, rather than just stagnate as a member of a group.
That's right. But the person who came first of all, the one who walked through the door, the one who said, "Oh, some of that for me," was the person who could do it.
Well, not always, though. You're right. You're right in the general.
In the general,
not in the real, not in the actual. Right in the general, and not in the actual. So generally, there is probably 100 million people on this planet that could do this work.
Yeah.
In the general sense of the work, but in the actual work itself, that's something else, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have an idea, which you may or may not
Well,
like.
you
I
do
don't know.
realise I'm saying that you are those actual people.
Yes.
Isn't it the difference between in the way and on the way?
That's what I said earlier. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. I mean, the way, I think the people who would be in the way it's not for everybody, simply because the kind of work and application and dedication and putting it together, a lot of people haven't found a way to make it happen. I mean, even, let's be honest with it, even in people who are involved with it, there are people who are kind of straggling by the wayside, you might say, in the situation, because they can't get themselves out of the way.
Right? Yes.
I mean, yeah,
you're going to get a lot of moths around a bright light.
Exactly. But the question is there a way to more systematically address those issues which people have that they don't seem to be able to overcome, that would offer a more pinpoint kind of strategy for people? Because, you know, like I see people, I know what's going on in some people. I think they just haven't managed their doubt, you know. For example,
they just haven't managed their what?
Doubt.
Oh, doubt, right.
You know, people have got historic doubt in them, and it comes up, and it's not necessarily even them, it's their culture coming up and going, oh, don't know about this, kind of like. But it, you know, the basic fundamental battle is between the real you, and the culture, isn't it?
In all what I said earlier on.
Exactly.
You know, when they learn to do it the Way's way, not their way, it works.
Yeah, exactly. So there's always that kind of thing, but people don't see that. It's a hall of mirrors. They see many reflections in the mirror, but it's actually one place with one set of mirrors, and recognizing it as the one beast that it is would make it easier to deal with it. But, you know, that means taking themselves on and be prepared to struggle a bit harder and more intensely and focusedly to make things happen themselves. I know for myself, when I joined in Putney and I was desperate to get myself together. So I really searched out the methodologies to be able to do that. And there's some amazing methodologies in the Eman papers and things that were released, which I applied and made use of in my life. And it helped me get myself together. And I was there for that, not to be a worshipper at somebody's feet or stuff. I was there for myself. It's the first principle in what I was doing.
It's a mystery to me how that ever got into it, but it did. Anyway, whatever. I was supposed to administrate that.
So this is one of the things that I brought up last week, right? I asked Pierce why he does it, and he said it's a passion, not a job. And
it's a passion, not a job.
Right. So for anybody who wants to make this a part of their life, they first have to form a habit of doing this. And the habit has to be something that can be easily formed. So it should be very convenient. It should be very easy to access, and it should be enjoyable or joyful. If it's joyful, if we do one event per month for a year, and it's joyful in some shape or form, and that helps people form a habit, that will get us more followers than doing more events that aren't as joyful. Like, look at everybody here. How do you form a habit? How do you, every one of you, form a habit? You form a habit.
Repeating it. You go. You attend.
No,
you take it on.
You don't. So
back.
there's a why. Orman, there's a why for why you attend. You attend because you enjoy attending. So how do we make this joyful for people? If we make it joyful for people, we won't have to work hard to make it a habit, because they will make it a habit for themselves.
My experience, Sachin, in that personally, is that you have to tell them a pack of lies, because you're telling them that there's something they're not, and I can't do that.
But we don't want those people. We don't want people who are falling for lies, because they will leave.
Well, yeah, but you see, what Yeah, well, now you see, this is the difference between the guru and the work, because they go to the guru because it's their joy of life. They're inspired and they follow the works of that person, or they take on his views, etc., etc., etc. But what he actually does when it comes down to it in the end is to reproduce himself in them, not them in them, himself in them. And this is a very dangerous way of doing things. Now, it doesn't matter in the general world, because who's going to miss a few thousand people? Nothing. That's a few thousand people, Pierce. Nothing much. And they come and go all the time, don't they? And this is it. But so what we're reaching for in the work that we do isn't to, increase the pleasure dome in a person's life, but afford them the opportunity of taking that life over for themselves, which is not in their possession. So that their life actually belongs to them.
Well, but that message.
Now, you would consider that not right. And I'll tell you why, because you see, this is what I was saying earlier on about the resistance, about the fact that the truth of something, people live a lie and they don't realize that they're living a lie. And when they begin to learn that they're living a lie, immediately is when you begin a confrontation or a contest, even in yourself, about the truth of something, the truth of self or the truth of a work. Right? Wouldn't you say so, Pierce? Would you think that? Am I being unfair here? Because there are deeper values to this.
Well, it makes me question. I mean, really what it boils down to is why is it that people in our culture don't recognize the need?
That's
well, because because they believe it's for themselves. That's why, right? And they don't know anything about planetary connection. They don't know anything about the Great Mother herself. They don't know about the actuality of why organic life is on this planet. I can go to a station in the morning and ask people, why do you exist? Or why do you live? Whatever you like. What are you here for? I can answer those questions. They can't. And they're the ones that would expect me to show them a life.
Here's the irony of it, though. I brought this up, I think, yesterday in a meeting that I had. I know exactly, if I wanted to get 100,000 members or 1 million members or whatever, I know exactly what I would have to do. What I would have to do is to put out an advertisement saying something to the effect of, come to my training and learn the advanced techniques of the law of attraction, right? Because that would do it. That would do it. I would get hundreds and hundreds of people to sign up for something like that. And the reason why is because it offers the promise. I mean, what's this based on, right? It's based on kind of level 6 gain and loss aspect of the astral light. Most people use law of attraction to will a new car, or will a new mate, or will a new job or a raise or whatever into their life. Because that's where they see their need for the most part. They don't see their need as having a higher embodiment of being able to deal in realms of astral and ethereal and these various domains.
They can't anyway. They can't. That's, see, now, here you go. That's what you could say. That's what you could do. But words like that mean nothing at all.
Well,
to that audience, to that particular audience, right?
I know.
And yet, I would make more sense of what you've just said than learning about the laws of attraction. One's got to ask the question, what did you say when you proposed to your wife? Can't be anything like what I said, because I said, would you be my first wife? She said, what? I said, well, it's a modern age, isn't it? I've got to be married at least 3 times. You know, I mean, come on. I mean, you know, this is it, isn't it? But that's the level of it, isn't it, really?
Yeah. But see,
We,
then
we
there's
go
this
along, we
aspect.
don't say, will you marry us? We say, how would you like to be in ownership of your true self? Because that's what's in the offering, isn't it? But it means a lot of hard work and they just don't want to do the work.
But I think this is the fallacy of it, because we're expecting people to come to this work by being attracted to what we are, when we're already way outside of the spectrum of most people's ability to perceive. What we really do is way outside of the spectrum of what people can generally perceive. So do we go get them where they are and coax them and nurture them along the way?
I've
right?
asked this question so many times. Good, Jim. Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
And you'll be asking this question in 100 years.
Seems like it.
Bruce. I swear to you, you will. Come on.
I mean, it seems like it to me. It seems like that.
If we
might
knew
be-
the answer to that, we'd all be on a bleeding Bahamas. We'd own the Bahamas. Do you understand what I
Yeah,
mean?
well, yeah.
Well, there you go.
You know, and it comes back to that idea of it's not what you do, it's the reason why you do it.
Well, the fact is, why do you live your life? Listen, see here. Why do you live your life? What are you doing this work for?
Mm.
I'm doing this work because it is the purpose of my life.
Yes. No,
All
that
right.
makes
And if you
sense.
talk about dedication, I can talk to you about dedication in any depth you want to go, because it's all within that purpose of life.
Yeah.
I never step outside of it. And everything I think, everything I do is to improve, add, or complement that particular purpose of life, because that purpose of life is directly tied up with the planet's evolutionary process.
Yeah.
That's what we serve eventually, and serve ourselves with a greater form of life when she evolves. There's a basic concept in that. That's why planets have organic life, because you do what the planet can't do. And as you develop, you improve the planetary condition, because the planetary condition evolves because of its, sorry, am I preaching here? I've got that look on your face, all of you.
No,
Saying,
no.
shut up, Orman. Just
But-
shut up with you.
I mean, it really does raise some questions, doesn't it?
I know, and they're the questions that are important, aren't they?
They are, yeah.
Because
They
if
are.
you can't answer it, you can't expect others to know it. Or see
Well, I
it.
mean, think of what people normally think of tarot, right? They think that they go to a tarot reading and they're going to learn about the tall, dark stranger, you know, that's coming to meet them, or they're going to learn about, you know, career opportunities. I mean, this is really actually the level of interest for people, and yet we all do have this core that everyone has a core that they're unaware of in the culture, but you got to find them where they live first. You know, it's no use
Hang on,
looking around.
you're absolutely right about the core bit, but what is
Yeah,
that
but-
core? Is it that which is to come, or is it in truth a remnant of the mistakes of the human race? Because it was something else before they got there.
Well, yes, yes, because that gets into the genetics that we talked about before that got altered and twisted and, you know,
Yeah,
that sort of thing. But yes, the planet is in a process of
Then
correcting
where do you
that.
find anybody who can show you how to put that right in yourself? Because surely, which is our view, isn't it? Vercel view, that if you're going to do any kind of development work, then it's better for you to do it from the standpoint of your original design of self than invent a new one, which is just as bad as the one you've got anyway, because
Sure.
it's not going to work.
Absolutely.
Might make you a few more bob, you might raise up the ranking, take on more responsibility, end up CEO. But when you die, when you get to your old age, when you're there by yourself and you take account of your life, right? You realize your life has been nothing more than just a role, because it's part of the whole system. It's not yours. That's
Yes.
a horrific place to be, you know. Do you know how many people are there?
Well, and yet at the same time, Orman, I mean, I'm struck with the realization that we must be a bit stupid, because you know, we're going around looking in our own house for our neighbors. You know, if I want to go find my neighbors, I go to my neighbors. I don't look around in every door in my house. And yet, you know,
Well, I have a 6-foot rule, and that's my only selling pitch. I've been there. I've been to tax school of salesmanship. You know, I've done the whole thing. Encyclopedia selling. I've done everything. Door to door, foot in the door. You know, suitcase stuff. I mean, I've done it all, right? And I developed one final rule out of all of it, and it's the only experience that counts. That if you've got something to sell, anyone within 6 feet of you is your victim. Anything else doesn't work. So how do you get within 6 feet of people?
Oh, you got to go to where they are.
These subject matters. That's the point.
I don't think you can
Try
start there.
try getting close to someone with this.
Listen, I think it's
what
off the
we're talking
radar.
about.
I don't think you can. I think it has to, you have to, you don't just go to someone like, you know, if you're a car salesman, you don't just go to them and go, hey, do you want to buy a car? Right? Because the obvious answer is always going to be, no, I'm just looking. Isn't it? Right? But you ask them about their family. You ask them about their, you know, what brings you in
But
today.
if
blah,
you
blah, blah,
went to
blah,
someone
blah,
and said you want to buy a car 1,000 times, you're bound to get at least 100 people say
Okay,
maybe,
right.
out of which you'll get 50 that say yes, and out of which 2, if you're lucky, will buy. But
Yeah,
you've
but
got to
it's
do the
really
groundwork. You've got to make the 1,000 calls, haven't you?
Well,
It's a numbers game in everything like that, isn't it?
no,
What?
no, there has to be more intelligence to it than what we're doing, in my opinion. I mean,
You might just be the new-
blaming
No,
myself.
it's fair enough. Please.
Yeah,
This is-
I think
this is
sadly,
totally fair enough.
yeah, I think
You might
sadly
just
Orman is
be-
right.
The new guy, you just might be the one that comes in with the new modernism
Well, see-
and way of it all, because to be quite frank with you, I feel like an old age pensioner in all of this. I am totally not with this culture in any way whatsoever. My grandchildren showed me that today. Yes.
Yeah.
You understand? They're
I mean,
growing
you've got
up.
7-year-olds playing with
One of them
iPads.
is bigger than me. Now, you got kids bigger than you. You know what it's like.
Yes, I do.
I'm totally not with it. So, you know, but I'm not going to be retired because I can do more than they can. So what do you retire? Do you retire the art of it for the sake of the future of it? I mean, how do you do it? This is, see, you might have the new way of doing it, because I've been struggling for the last, God knows, 50 or 60 odd years to get this message across, but it doesn't, you know, you're fighting it all the way along the line.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't expect people to just say, wow, this is amazing work. You know, let's join this. I have to alter what I'm doing. That's the only thing I can alter. I can't
Well,
alter.
can we have a look at this? Because, I mean, you know, don't you think this is important? Because this is to do with us, really, isn't it? Sorry, Saction. Welcome to the club. Listen, you'll be saying this yourself one day. What I'm saying is, well, it's a good job no one else came then, isn't it? We can call this us. It's about time we had a good old chat about things.
Mhm.
You see, I could turn around and say the next step from the beginning, right, is that what resists you isn't that person. It's their family tree. It's their transient nature of life, right? And backing that up is a whole maybe 10 or 15 years of formal education and control. That's also in your face.
Yes.
And that person thinks they can dump all that. It just like that, baby, I'm new, you know, the new me, and think that it's all going to happen and they can sit down and do it. You know,
But
or
Orman,
like
it-
great
but Orman-
elemental nature of the world is going to attend them instantly because they happen to change their gown, which doesn't exist.
Yes,
See,
but Orman,
what
it
about the
doesn't-
transient nature of life?
But okay, so granted, yes, but it doesn't do us any good waxing philosophical about why people aren't coming. We just have
That's
to
not
change
waxing
something to do it.
philosophical. I meet it all the time, actual.
Hmm.
It's actual time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm serious. You do the same. You can't say you don't. You meet it all the time in the people that come to you, Because if they're not even at that stage yet, they will be very soon if you reach them.
Yep.
Because that transient line is not going to let them go. You belong to your mother and your mother's mother and your grandfathers and aunts and uncles and going back hundreds of years even maybe. Huh? You belong to that transient tree. Yes? And they're not going to let you go, because if you go, or especially if it's the woman, they can't produce anymore, can they? There's no more to feed the tree. Would you agree on that? I mean, you know, and it's a very real influence. Listen,
Okay.
90% of the people who die in hospitals, in example, say, what's all these relatives of mine doing around the bed? They've been dead, most of them, for 100 years, you know. And why is it that it goes thousands and thousands and thousands of times from people who are supposed to be dead from dementia? Even say, what are all my relatives doing here? Oh, don't worry about that. He's dementia. You know, I mean, how can we ignore the truth of that? Because you can't, because you're not a liar. I can't, because I'm not a liar. I'm sensitive to it. I see it in reality, right? In the actuality of that reality too, which is where it's real. So that's
Okay,
your
so
first
this
resistance.
is reality. This is reality, and and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that's the physics of how it works in that regard. But at the same time, you know, if that is the reality of the situation, then again, it comes back to me. I have to adapt to help make this happen. I can't expect everything to change around me so that it happens. I have to work with what I'm given.
May I say something?
Yes.
Which is experimentation is a very good word. And one of the things I've pondered about this question, obviously, for a long time as well. And what you talked about earlier on, Pierce, about the laws of attraction and how people would flood to you. What about the idea, you know, you have step down generators, step down stations with power where a higher voltage goes to a lower voltage and vice versa. What about the idea that a milieu such as that, an environment such as that, would possibly have more potential candidates for a way in it? Because I mean, you say to them, you go to somebody and you say, you want to attract things to yourself. Okay, are you really happy with these things you attract to yourself? What, you know, because it's bullshit, really. We know that it's temporary and it's transitory and people are pursuing dreams. What about the idea that in giving them something of what they dream about at a cultural level, you can, with some of them maybe, open their minds to something more that is possible beyond that? And in that, and in that kind of scenario, you also create a biological shield, you create a source of income, you create finances for yourself that allow you to do more experimentation and be more proactive in the thing, in trying out lots of different things. But you create a milieu and you have some kind of ability to talk to these people at their level and open the doors to something more. So it's a suggestion.
Yeah. And I'm actually quite with it from that standpoint. And the irony in this is that given what we do and what we know and what we've been exposed to, I could sure do a better job at explaining the actual mechanics of the law of attraction than someone like Jay-Z Knight can do, right? Because that's all just a pipe dream. I mean, we know how this stuff works. We know how to do things like this. Yeah, it's called natural magic, isn't it? I suppose, but it doesn't work. Doesn't work the way they say.
And how are you going to turn them towards the way or towards the work that we do when they're all nicely happy with what you promised them?
Well, that's the trick. That's the next step.
No,
That's
because
Well, you have to
The
you have to take the red fire engine away from the child at a certain point with a cold bucket of reality.
Yeah, we have to pepper important aspects into those smaller, Like we have to put a nice, healthy, bitter pill in that chocolate that we give them.
Yeah, right.
every time.
It never works though. You can't sell this kind of stuff, can you?
No.
You can't sell the word. It won't work. It never
It works.
does. It's never
No.
worked. It's never ever worked.
Have we
The
ever
only
tried
thing
it?
you can do is hope that you come across enough people that are open to what it is that you're saying. So I think it comes down in the end, Piers, to be honest with you, to one's own skill and experience of it. But there's only one way you get that skill. You've got to go in at the deep end. There's no other way.
Yeah.
And if you survive, you'll come out at the shallow end with everything you need to be able to practice such things. Because you've got to, and here's from my point of view, right? You've got to offset that transient resistance in the first place. That's the very first issue before anything. Even they're relearning the whole shooting match, because once that family tree or that transient tree picks up the signal from what you're doing there, interfering with the role, interfering with the status, interfering with the status quo, if you like, of the balance of the person, which is nicely feeding its own transient family, etc., etc., etc. It's going to look at you and it's going to stop them because they can still shut the person down.
Right.
Now, a lot of people think you've got to be occult to do that. And you don't. It's absolutely not occult at all, but that's how they would view it. Because there's one thing that the tree can't argue with, and that is who occupies the space of that person, or what occupies that space, that now in them. Do you follow what I'm at here?
Yeah.
Right, from what you said earlier on, which is quite correct. That was very powerful what you said at the beginning, very. But, you know, it's one of those things that you're going to take, you know, could be years unraveling the whole aspects of it. But where do you start? You've got to start somewhere. But in reality, when you talk to that person, you need something that will bring that resistance to an end, even if it's only temporary, right? In other words, you've got to have something. Wait, Enigma, stop it. What are you doing? Come on. You're laughing at something. What is it?
I thought of a baseball bat, but
I won't get into
that was the wrong,
that's for sure.
wrong thought. I was joking.
I know in money, whatever you do. Right, okay. Yeah, well, I'm talking about like what you yourself have. And one of those things, of course, is something that attends you because of what you are rather than who you are. So the question of what you are comes into this. You can't do this work as a who. You can only do it as a what, because it needs something real to hang on to. So you have various aspects about yourself that act as initiators of such situations. For example, the amethyst effect, right? Doesn't that create a zone of the absence of resistance, and your whole family tree can stand around the outside of it, looking gormless, if you like? It doesn't make any difference, and they cannot get any closer during that time.
Mm-hmm. It's
Your engagement with that one person, right?
Yeah.
That's not a cult. That
Yeah.
is actually a natural process. Because when you do the planetary business, these are the kind of things that come along as a custodian of that particular kind of event.
Right.
That's what's known as a custodian, you see. Now you're talking way terms. Now you're talking esoteric. Now you're talking transient, just that.
Yeah.
But it's that amethyst effect. That's why priests wear amethyst rings. So do bishops, you know, because to make sure that the zone of their so-called religious event isn't interfered with. It will tranquilize anything that approaches it, including something transient. Because if they're going to put religion to someone, or as they say, in someone, they want more sheep in their flock. The family tree that own the sheep are going to turn up in protest, aren't they? And it's the
Yeah,
amethyst.
and the difference between us and them is that I would rather see a bunch of shepherds than a bunch of sheep. Yeah.
Well, shepherds can only be shepherds if they've got some sheep to shepherd, haven't they?
Well, true. Or maybe I'll just leave that whole business to alone then.
It's like, you know, these healers all over the place. I mean, yeah, oh, I'm a healer. Oh, no, you're not. Not at that moment, you're not. You're only a healer when you're healing.
Yeah, right.
Otherwise, you're just a big mouth, you know, or a big head or something. You just, why? Why the need to say you're a healer? You either are or you're not, and it's switched on all the time and it works. Same with these other effects. Now you've got more than that. You've got the amethyst effect, the amber effect, the rose quartz effect, and these sort of differences work at different things, because the amber has the same effect upon the transcendental nature of that person's life and connections rather than the transient. That's amethyst.
Yeah.
So this is knowledge that you learn by struggling in the deep end.
Sure.
It's not something that can be relayed to someone who thinks they know how to alter themselves because they have an inspiration, they want to change themselves because they don't know what they are. How can someone who doesn't know what they are do a good job on themselves? Because they wouldn't know how to start, surely. Except unless, of course, they think they do. But it's all right, they can waste themselves, but you better not waste them, because they'll have something to say about that. You've got something to blame, haven't you? That's human nature, isn't it? These are all experiences from the deep end. I nearly said the dark end, sorry. The deep end, right? Watch
No,
out
it's not even the deep end.
huh?
It's experiences from the incoming ends that I talked about before. It's not deep end. It's right on the cutting edge. Yeah, isn't it?
I'm glad you say so. Thanks for the compliment. I shall send you a letter of appreciation later.
All right, thanks. So I do need to throw this in. We are up against the time, and I do have some other obligations this afternoon, as I'm sure some of you also do as well. So need to kind of wind things in, wrap it
So
up.
in other words, bugger off. That's what you're saying.
No. 'cause
Time's
I think
up.
this has been incredible.
Do what these so-called, what do they call them? Psychiatric people do. Yeah. Time's up.
Time's
Right
up,
in the
quick.
middle of a
Yeah.
sentence, bugger off. Unless you want to pay me like $10.
Yeah. No, but
Interesting afternoon. Thank you, Piers.
no, thank you. Yeah. Thank
Yes.
you all, actually.
Pierce and Orman, one of the things, maybe next time we do, next time we do,
what?
next time we meet next week, next Sunday.
Oh, are we? I like this guy.
I'm a
Yeah,
center
okay.
for punishment, as somebody has said earlier. So next time we do that, let's come with one suggestion. One, no more than one, and no less than one. One suggestion, everybody come up with one suggestion of an idea that you think will work. I don't care if it's worked in the past or not. One suggestion on what will work, and we'll start implementing it.
I already have mine. Make Sachin the general manager.
I have a day job. I'm not going to become general manager. I'll bring one suggestion.
Can we put a term on this rather than actually, it could be terms and conditions, providing it's not boring. It's nothing like sitting there for 2 hours being bored to bloody death.
You're the boss. That's
your eyes get tired and it gets heavy and you fall like you're on asleep and oh my God. And if it's anything like me, I feel like I need to go to the loo, this sort of thing. It's awful.
I agree. I mean, if it's boring, it's not joyful. So yes, if it's boring, it's not joyful. Yes. So not boring. Agreed.
Well, it's still going to be there next Sunday. We're not coming to an end, are we, during this week anyway?
Well, if we are, thank you all.
You're
Right.
a funny man, Piers. So just before we
You
go,
don't know, do you?
how are you doing in America? How's the
Me?
membership going? Is it, yes, how's it? Well, you're the man in America, not us. Are we
Well-
coming to see what the great man has to say? See what you bring about by
like,
bringing
like,
this
like,
together.
like I've said, and you know, this is this realization that the biggest mistake that I made over the past several years in this regard was giving everything away for free. I was doing everything, you know, I mean, and people will come. I can get 50 people here as long as I don't charge anything for it. As soon as I say it's $7 or $35, that's when the truth comes out. And so, yeah, that's how things are doing here. I'm having a rethink about my own approach because I can't change anything other than me. And that's all there's to that.
Just have one point.
Huh?
Do you think that has anything to do with who you're working for?
What do you mean? God?
No, no, definitely. not that. I'm
My
talking
boss.
about a bit more near the reality of this moment in time.
Yeah.
Who are you working for?
I don't catch your context yet.
Okay, well, there you go. That's my bit for next week then. How
Okay.
about that?
Right.
Fair
Good.
enough. That should be interesting, wouldn't it?
I'm working
You're
for
all
me.
bound by my
I'm
book
working
to
for-
answer that. You know that. I'm bound by answering yours, whatever it happens to be. We should have a lottery, see who gets first shot at it, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
He who is first takes the day, right? Most enjoyable. Sachin's right. It's got to be enjoyable. Yeah.
Joyful, not enjoyable.
Oh, I thought you said.
No, I said
oh,
very
joy-
specific, joyful, not
oh,
enjoyable.
uh,
Joyful is a little deeper, enjoyable is very superficial.
Say the what? The what was superficial?
So enjoyable feels very superficial. Doesn't really like to me, enjoyment is more superficial. Like I just enjoy this, where joyful feels more connected to the essence.
I think enjoyment sounds more like a promise. I mean,
Well-
you know, there's such a thing as an ennobled way in which joy is a member. Yeah.
I would put it this way.
Enjoyment.
I would put it
There you
this
go.
way. Enjoyment, MENT, means that it is titillating the mind, whereas joyful is something that comes from the core. It's full, something that radiates out.
groundwork for you, isn't it? Now that's groundwork. There he is, the king of groundwork. That is groundwork. That's it. Back to his
Yeah.
Monday nights now, isn't it? Because that's next, isn't it?
Hmm.
Isn't it? Tomorrow night, Monday night. Is that right?
I have nothing on the calendar for tomorrow night, but
Oh, you have nothing on the calendar. Well, Enigma has. Maybe we should go and pester him while he's trying to do his Monday night.
all
I'm
right.
good
I
on
think
the
I can
other
do my line. Good morning, good evening, good night, because of where everyone is in the
See you
world at
soon.
this point in time. Yep. See you soon. Thank you all so much.
Pleasure all. See you
Yeah.
next time.
Thank you very much. Great conference. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye for now.
Like it. See you.